I want you to think about the last time someone made you feel like you were the problem, not just a minor disagreement. That very specific sinking sensation where you walk away genuinely wondering if you're just too sensitive, too dramatic, or if your grip on reality is somehow slipping. You probably know exactly the feeling I'm talking about. Most people do, unfortunately. And the worst part is just how long it takes you to stop believing their version of events. Some of you listening right now might still be untangling yourself from that internalized monologue. It's a heavy psychological weight, and it literally alters how you move through the world. What clinical observation and behavioral data now show us is that the shrinking feeling, that walking on eggshells feeling, it isn't an accident. It isn't just a personality clash. It is an architecture built slowly and deliberately by someone who required you to be small so they could maintain a manufactured sense of superiority. And that is the exact paradigm shift we are unpacking today. We are not here to do a superficial rundown of red flags. You are well beyond the pop psychology basics. We are going much deeper. Today we're pulling from a dense stack of research. Dr. Ramani Durvasula's clinical insights on pathological narcissism, Thomas Erikson's behavioral typologies from Surrounded by Narcissists, and some fascinating elite threat assessment protocols from former FBI and Secret Service interrogators. Our mission is to deconstruct this manipulation cycle as a highly predictable, mechanical system, to understand the biological impact it has on your body, and most importantly, to hand you a tactical framework to reclaim your autonomy, because we have to start with the biology. Treating this strictly as an emotional issue completely misses the point. It misses the sheer physical devastation these relationships cause. We are essentially looking at an unspoken global public health crisis. Think about this. We spend billions as a society on sleep optimization, longevity protocols, organic diets, but the research suggests that chronic exposure to a highly antagonistic narcissistic individual will unravel your cellular health faster than almost any dietary factor. It comes down to the mechanics of the human nervous system. Interpersonal stress is uniquely corrosive because you cannot escape it. If you have a demanding job, your cortisol and adrenaline spike, but eventually you go home, the parasympathetic nervous system engages, and you rest, you digest, you recover. But when the stressor is your spouse, your parent, or a micromanaging boss you depend on for survival, there is no refractory period. Your amygdala is locked in a hyper-vigilant state indefinitely. You are essentially marinating your internal organs in a continuous drip of cortisol and inflammatory cytokines. Over time, that catabolic state degrades everything. The gut microbiome gets decimated through the vagus nerve connection, which leads to systemic inflammation. And the medical literature is quietly starting to reflect this, even if primary care models haven't caught up yet. What researchers are seeing is disproportionately high rates of autoimmune diseases, fibromyalgia, severe dermatological eruptions, unexplainable cardiovascular anomalies, all in patients who report high levels of inescapable emotional abuse. The single most compelling piece of evidence in the research for me is a case study about a woman who was literally trapped in an orthopedic brace. She had undergone a standard surgery, but for years her body simply refused to heal. The bone wouldn't knit, the tissue wouldn't repair. Her surgical team was completely baffled because on paper she was receiving best practice care. Her body was reallocating all of its energy to sheer nervous system survival. That left zero capacity for cellular repair. And then the highly narcissistic relationship she was in abruptly ended. She was removed from that toxic environment, and inside of a single week, the brace came off. She walked into her doctor's office after years of zero progress and said, "It's the weirdest thing, but I'm suddenly better." Her body finally perceived the environment as safe enough to initiate the healing cascade. That case perfectly isolates the variable. Dr. Ramani also highlighted a parallel finding from a team of rheumatologists in Egypt. They were studying patients with severe joint and autoimmune issues and noticed a strange split in their data. One cohort responded beautifully to standard medications, but the other cohort, given the exact same medications at the exact same dosages, showed zero clinical improvement. So they ran a survey to find the differentiating variable. They controlled for diet, genetics, environmental toxins, none of it explained the gap. The only shared variable among the patients who were failing to heal was that they were all currently embedded in highly toxic, abusive relationships. This exposes a massive blind spot in Western medicine. We obsess over microplastics and screen time, but we don't apply that same discernment to the humans we allow into our lives. The system is built on diagnostic codes and pharmacological symptom management. An oncologist or a rheumatologist isn't trained, nor do they have the billing time, to sit down and ask, tell me about the power dynamics in your marriage. Are you being subjected to ambient gaslighting? They just increase the dosage of the anti-inflammatory, but no amount of medication can outcompete a nervous system that genuinely believes it is fighting for its life 24 hours a day. It is treating a bullet wound with a bat while the patient is still standing on the firing line. Which means if the medical establishment isn't going to screen for this, we have to become experts at identifying the pathology ourselves. So let's talk about the architects of this stress. Narcissism isn't just taking too many selfies. It exists on a continuum. At the low end, it's emotional immaturity. At the high end, it's malignant and coercive. The research uses a specific analogy to explain the core mechanism, and I think it's the most accurate visual representation of this pathology we have, the volcano and the manhole cover. If you want to understand the seemingly irrational behavior of a malignant narcissist, you have to look beneath the grandiosity. At their absolute core, they are a churning, volatile volcano of profound shame, deep-seated inadequacy. But acknowledging that shame would psychologically annihilate them. The ego cannot tolerate the reality of that emptiness. So as a trauma response usually formed very early in life, they cap the volcano with a massive heavy iron manhole cover, and the cover is the grandiosity, the arrogance, the entitlement, the performative perfection, the demands for special treatment. It is desperately heavy armor. And the conflict happens because life inevitably nudges that manhole cover. A co-worker gets a promotion they wanted. Their partner points out a minor mistake in a gentle way. They get stuck in traffic and feel powerless. The cover shifts, and the magma of that core shame gets exposed to the air. Here is the critical neurobiological difference. When a healthy person feels shame or guilt, they internalize it. They reflect. They might feel sadness, or a desire to apologize. But when a highly narcissistic individual's shame is triggered, it instantly transmutes into projective rage. They hurl that magma onto whoever happens to be closest, usually a spouse or a child, effectively burning them so that the narcissist doesn't have to feel their own heat. That perfectly explains the disproportionate rage. You ask them to pick up their socks and suddenly you're subjected to a 3-hour screaming match about how you never support their dreams. Because it was never about the socks, it was about the fact that your request made them feel momentarily flawed, which threatened the manhole cover. Now, what's vital to understand is that this defensive structure doesn't always look like the loud, brash CEO. That is the danger of stereotypes. If you're only scanning your environment for the grandiose narcissist, the one obsessed with status, demanding the best table, name-dropping, you will be completely blindsided by the more insidious typologies. The research breaks down 5 distinct presentations. The first is grandiose, which we just described, but the second, the vulnerable narcissist, is arguably the most destructive because of its camouflage. The vulnerable narcissist completely subverts the expectation. They don't look arrogant at all. They look sullen, resentful, and persistently victimized. They are the chronic martyrs operating from a baseline belief that the world is inherently unfair, that everyone else was handed the success that was stolen from them. They weaponize pity, and for highly empathetic people, this is a lethal trap. You look at a vulnerable narcissist, and your instinct isn't to run. Your instinct is to rescue them. You think they've just had a run of bad luck. You tell yourself, if I just give them enough love, enough support, enough stability, they'll finally heal. But it's a black hole. Because their victimhood is their identity. If you actually solve their problems, you strip them of their primary tool for manipulating you, so they will self-sabotage just to ensure they remain the victim and then blame you for the failure. The third type moves into the darker end of the spectrum, the malignant narcissist. This is where we cross the border from psychological manipulation into the territory of psychopathy and physical danger. The malice here is intentional. They aren't just reacting out of shame. They actively derive pleasure from dominating, controlling, and isolating their targets. The research gives a deeply unsettling example of this. You might start dating someone, and within a month they buy you a top-of-the-line smartphone, completely unprompted. To the outside world, and even to you initially, it looks like overwhelming generosity. But the underlying mechanism is surveillance. They are installing location trackers. They want to monitor your texts. The malignant narcissist isolates you by creating an environment of intense paranoia. The charm phase with them is exceptionally short-lived because their need for absolute control overrides their ability to maintain the facade, which is a stark contrast to the fourth type, the communal narcissist, who lives entirely for the facade. This is the person who flies to a different continent to rescue sea turtles, or the parent who essentially runs the local school's PTA with an iron fist. They appear completely selfless, but the altruism is entirely transactional. They are doing good deeds exclusively to harvest supply. The applause, the awards, the public validation of being a savior, and the horrific duality of the communal narcissist is that behind closed doors they are often incredibly cruel and neglectful to their own families. Their children grow up in a terrifying cognitive dissonance. The entire town worships their parent as a hometown hero, while the child is being emotionally starved at home. And if the child tries to speak out, the community gaslight them, saying, "How can you say that? Look at all the good your mother does. It's a perfect cover." Finally, the fifth type, the self-righteous narcissist. These individuals are defined by a rigid, punishing moralism. They establish an impossible set of behavioral routines and ethical standards, and they view themselves as the ultimate arbiters of right and wrong. They are the grand inquisitors of everyday life. If you are 10 minutes late to an event because your tire blew out, they will not offer empathy. They will lecture you on your lack of discipline, your disrespect for their time, your fundamental character flaws. Being around them feels like living under an endless, unwinnable cross-examination. So once you understand these typologies, the inevitable question arises. It's the uncomfortable question every survivor eventually asks themselves. Why me? Why did they choose me? Am I fundamentally weak? Did they see me as a pushover? That is the immediate fear. But the research completely flips the script. Manipulators do not pick weak people. Weakness doesn't provide them with the high-yield supply they need. They pick people with specific traits that can be exploited: immense empathy, extreme agreeableness, high competence, deep-seated loyalty. They are looking for an energy source. And this is where we get into the behavioral profiling tactics outlined by Thomas Erikson. A sophisticated manipulator uses what's called identity hacking through a technique called pre-committing. Let's drill into the mechanics of this because it explains so much of the cognitive dissonance victims feel. It exploits our psychological need for internal consistency. Very early in the relationship, the manipulator will identify your core values and get you to explicitly claim them. Here is what that sounds like in practice. They might engineer a conversation where they say something like, "I've been abandoned so many times because people are so quick to judge." But you aren't like that. You are the most fiercely loyal, forgiving person I've ever met. And your ego lights up. You think, yes, that is who I am. I pride myself on my loyalty. You have just silently made an I am statement. You have anchored your identity within the dynamic of that relationship. Fast forward 6 months. The manipulator does something objectively horrific. They lie, they betray you, they humiliate you. Your biological instinct is to flee, but your subconscious suddenly steps in. If you leave, you violate the I am statement. You contradict your own claimed identity of being the ultimate loyal, forgiving person. So you stay. You forgive them, not because their behavior warrants forgiveness, but to soothe your own cognitive dissonance and prove your identity to yourself. They effectively turned your own moral compass into a bear trap. And Erikson's framework takes this a step further by mapping how this manipulation is custom tailored to your specific behavioral profile using the DISC assessment. Dominant is red, influential is yellow, steady is green, compliant is blue. It's basically an operational matrix for exploitation. If a narcissist is targeting a red, someone who is highly dominant, assertive, and driven by challenges, they know that playing the victim won't work. Reds despise perceived weakness. So how do you trap a highly assertive, dominant person? You gamify the relationship. The narcissist draws the red into endless circular power struggles. They challenge the red's competence or throw up massive roadblocks, and the red, completely driven by the need to win and conquer the challenge, gets tunnel vision. They pour all of their formidable intellect and energy into solving the manufactured crisis, completely failing to realize that they are being exhausted and managed. They get so focused on winning the battle that they don't realize they've been drafted into the wrong war. Now contrast that with the yellows, the highly influential, extroverted, optimistic people. Yellows run on positive reinforcement and connection, so how do they get hooked? The narcissist deploys an overwhelming barrage of hyper-focused attention. They become the yellow's biggest fan, and the yellow thrives on this validation. They open the floodgates and pour all of their vibrant life force into the relationship. The narcissist acts as a parasite, harvesting that optimism until the yellow is completely drained, just a shell of their former self. Then we have the greens, the steady, relational, deeply empathetic peacemakers, and these are the most common long-term targets. Their core operating system prioritizes harmony and conflict avoidance above all else. So the narcissist exploits this by constantly manufacturing emotional volatility, forcing the green to act as a permanent emotional regulator. The green will sacrifice their own boundaries, their own needs, their own reality, operating under the tragic illusion that if they can just provide enough unconditional love, the narcissist will eventually settle down, which is mathematically impossible because the narcissist's baseline is chaos. Finally, the blues. The compliant, detail-oriented, highly logical perfectionists. How do they get dismantled? Through shifting standards and moving goalposts. The narcissist gives the blue a complex set of demands, and the blue, using all their analytical skills, executes those demands perfectly. But the moment they do, the narcissist completely rewrites the rules and criticizes the blue for failing. The blue becomes obsessed with decoding the true rules of the relationship, trapped in a maze that has no exit. Now, hearing all of this, if you are a naturally empathetic green or an optimistic yellow, it's easy to feel like your personality is a fatal flaw. Like having a big heart or a logical mind is the liability. I want to be uncompromisingly clear about this. You were never the problem. The vulnerability is not a flaw, it is actually a highly evolved human strength that has been hijacked. Empathy, loyalty, the desire for harmony, these are the building blocks of a healthy society. You are not at fault because someone looked at your light and decided to use it to power their own dark machinery. You didn't do anything wrong. You were simply subjected to a sophisticated psychological operation, and that operation follows a rigid, highly predictable sequence. The tactics aren't random moods, they are a calculated sequence, a system, and understanding the system is the first step in dismantling its power. Stage 1 is the love bombing phase, the setup, a deluge of overwhelming affection, mirroring, rushed intimacy. It's not just compliments, it's a profound mirroring of your deepest desires. They like the same obscure music, they have the exact same vision for the future. They fast-track intimacy, trying to move in together after 6 weeks, declaring you their soulmate. But we have to recategorize this behavior. This is not real love. It is a high-speed data-gathering mission. They are mapping your psychology, finding out what makes you insecure, what kind of validation you crave. They are creating a bespoke, idealized version of themselves, specifically designed to hack your neurochemistry, flooding your brain with dopamine and oxytocin. They are essentially building the drug that you are about to become addicted to. Because once that baseline of euphoria is established, the system inevitably shifts into stage 2, devaluation and gaslighting. And it is not a sudden cliff drop. If it were sudden, your survival instincts would kick in and you would leave. The devaluation is a masterclass in slow titration. It goes from 100% idealization down to 90% good, 10% critical, a subtle eye roll when you speak, a backhanded compliment about your career, and when you ask about it, they tell you you're imagining things. Then it slips to 80-20, then 60-40, until suddenly, months or years later, you are living in a reality that is 10% good and 90% psychological torment, exhausted, walking on eggshells, desperately trying to get back to the 100% phase you experienced at the beginning. And this is where the two primary tools of maintenance are deployed: future faking and gaslighting. Future faking is how they bridge the gap during the bad times. They promise the promotion, the marriage, the therapy. As soon as this stressful period is over, everything will go back to how it was. It keeps you investing in a future they have zero intention of actualizing, while the gaslighting systematically dismantles your trust in your own memory and perception. They flat out deny saying things they said 5 minutes ago. They accuse you of being unstable or hysterical for reacting to their cruelty. Eventually, you stop trusting your own brain, which culminates in the trauma bond. I use the slot machine analogy here because it perfectly explains why people get trapped. Think of a slot machine. The human brain is incredibly susceptible to intermittent reinforcement. You walk into a casino and put $500 into the machine. You pull the lever, nothing. You pull it again, nothing. You are losing everything you put in. Then right as you're about to walk away, the lights flash and it pays out $25. That $25 is that one good day. That fleeting moment where they act like the person from the love bombing phase. That intermittent payout floods your starved brain with a massive dopamine spike. You don't walk away because you are physiologically hooked on the unpredictability, hoping for the jackpot. But the real reason we stay at the machine until we are utterly bankrupt goes deeper than just dopamine. It's a toxic fusion of the sunk cost fallacy and territorial jealousy. You have poured years of your life into this person. You think, if I walk away from this machine now, someone else is gonna walk up, pull the lever once, and win the jackpot that I paid for. I built this person. I'm not gonna let the next partner reap the rewards of my suffering. So you stay to protect your investment. But the critical reality is that the jackpot doesn't exist. There is no jackpot. The machine is mathematically rigged. It was built from the start to drain everything you have, which brings us to stage 3, hoovering. Because eventually your survival instinct does kick in. You try to leave, and that is when the narcissist panics. They don't like losing control. If you attempt to establish independence, they deploy the vacuum cleaner. They hoover you back in. Suddenly they're crying, booking couples counseling, apologizing. It is entirely performative, a tactical retreat designed to stop your exit. And the moment you unpack your bags, the devaluation resumes, almost always with a new layer of vindictiveness. So if this is a rigged game, how do we actually talk to these people when confrontation is inevitable? Because you can't always just walk away. Sometimes it's a co-parent, sometimes it's a boss. This is where we shift into elite communication defense, the biology of a conversation. First impressions happen in 3 milliseconds. When a high conflict person escalates into screaming, your amygdala processes it as a literal physical threat to your life, reverting to ancient survival instincts. Under severe verbal attack, people will subconsciously bring their hands up to cover their neck, specifically the suprasternal notch. It's a defense against large predators going for the throat. Your brain is literally preparing for a tiger attack. And when you are in that state, logic is dead. The amygdala hijacks the prefrontal cortex. You cannot think strategically. You have to actively hack your own nervous system. PLAN. P stands for purpose. Know your mission. What is the single outcome you need from this conversation? Do not get derailed by their emotional flooding. Anchor entirely to your purpose. L is for listen face. Connect with their headspace to build tactical rapport. You are not validating them. You are gathering intelligence to anticipate their next move. A is for ask. Never make declarative statements. Ask calibrated questions that force them to do the cognitive labor. And N is for now. Stay present. Do not get pulled into relitigating the past or defending yourself against accusations that have nothing to do with why you are in this conversation. Now here is what this looks like in practice. because it can feel like trying to play chess with someone who is playing dodgeball. The first tactical phrase is the repeat hack. If they hurl a vitriolic insult, you maintain a flat expression, pause, and say calmly, "I need you to say that again for me." That's it. Just, "I need you to say that again for me." It forces an immediate neurological shift. By forcing them to pause, retrieve the memory, and articulate it again, you demand that they engage their prefrontal cortex. It usually stops the attack cold, because hearing their own absurdity in a calm environment destroys their momentum. The second tactical phrase is the knot hack. When they are attacking your character, you raise your hands slightly, open your palms and say, "Help me find the knot. What am I missing here?" Now that sounds like you are taking the blame. But tactically, it is weaponized humility. It detaches the problem from the person. You are placing the conflict on the table as a third entity. It de-escalates their defensive posture because they feel like they are being asked to solve a puzzle rather than win a fight. These communication tools are great for survival, but they do not fix the underlying pathology of the relationship, which brings us to recognizing the illusion. We stay because we want to believe that the magic of the love bombing phase was real. We don't want to see the sleight of hand. We use a single data point from the past to overwrite a mountain of current empirical evidence. So how do we break the illusion? We apply the rule of threes. The first time someone does something manipulative, it's an event. The second time is a coincidence. The third time, it is a pattern. And once a pattern is established, you must believe the pattern, not the potential, which requires radical acceptance, the painful but necessary step of realizing they will not change. Think of it this way: you have to stop treating a bandsaw like a potato peeler. You keep holding a potato to a screaming industrial bandsaw, hoping it will gently peel it, and every time it rips your fingers off, it is a bandsaw. It is performing exactly as it was engineered to. The dysfunction is your continued expectation that it will suddenly become a gentle kitchen utensil. Here is a mental exercise I want you to do right now. Think of a time the narcissistic person in your life didn't show up to an event, a family Thanksgiving, a weekend getaway. They cancelled at the last minute. Remember how the oxygen returned to the room, how peaceful the dynamic suddenly became. The ambient terror just evaporated. That moment later, it tells you exactly what you have been living under, and once you radically accept who they are, you face a brutal crossroads. Do you stay or do you go? Which brings us to the honest critique of the conventional advice, because the standard response, "just leave," is breathtakingly reductive. Erikson's book casually suggests just leaving your job if your boss is a narcissist. But for people with mortgages, with children, with financial dependence, that is a shrug, not real advice. And it completely ignores the very real dangers of leaving, because leaving triggers post-separation abuse, smear campaigns, financial punishment. Narcissists need to control the narrative, and the period immediately after leaving is often the most volatile of the entire relationship. So here is a strategy for staying. If you must stay for kids or finances, build your bench of outside support, and you apply the grey rock method. Don't go deep. Don't defend, don't engage, don't explain, don't personalize. You treat them like a weather report. If the weatherman says it's going to rain acid, you don't argue with the TV. You grab an umbrella. If they attack you, you say, "Okay." You give them absolute nothingness. You starve them of conflict supply. Now, what about the societal pressure to forgive? Because that pressure hits everyone, whether you leave or stay. Society treats forgiveness like an obligatory magic eraser. But forced forgiveness of an unrepentant abuser is psychologically damaging. You can heal through indifference instead. True healing is genuinely not caring what they are doing. The opposite of love is not hate. Hate still takes energy. The opposite of love is indifference. To get there, you have to hold two truths simultaneously. Truth 1, my parent had a horrific childhood. Truth 2, the way they treated me was unacceptable, and I am revoking their access to my life. Acknowledging their pain does not obligate you to be their punching bag, which leads to the most important forgiveness of all, self-forgiveness. You must forgive yourself for trusting them, for staying, and for not knowing better. Letting go of that guilt is the first step toward reclaiming your actual identity. Dr. Ramani makes an important distinction here between the words victim and survivor. Victim implies passivity, but survival is an active verb. It is messy. It is eating a candy bar for dinner and having dark circles under your eyes. It requires immense daily strength just to maintain baseline functioning, but eventually you move to thriving. And reclaiming yourself after narcissistic abuse isn't always a grand existential journey. Sometimes it is literally just remembering that you are allowed to want fresh tomatoes on your pizza. If you used to ask for tomatoes and were mocked or told you were selfish for it, reclaiming yourself is ordering the tomatoes and realizing nobody is going to scream at you. It is taking the lead weights off the bat, and when those weights fall off, there is this beautiful disorienting lightness to your life. So if you now understand that you were never the problem, how do you make sure you don't repeat the cycle with someone new? By practicing extreme discernment. Maya Angelou said, "When people show you who they are, believe them the first time. Don't assume you can love them into being a better person." We meticulously read the ingredients on our food labels to avoid processed sugars. We must be equally discerning about the humans we allow into our lives. If the ingredients are toxic, put them back on the shelf. So to bring this full circle, we started with the biology, the physical devastation of chronic narcissistic stress. We moved through the mechanics of the manipulation system, the love bombing, the devaluation, the hoovering. We talked about radical acceptance, grey rocking, self-forgiveness, and finally reclaiming your autonomy. But I want to leave you with one broader thought. We have talked about individuals today, but what about the world we live in? Because we are increasingly living in a narcissistic culture, a society that functions exactly like the casino we described. A culture that rewards grandiosity on social media, equates aggression with leadership, and sells us the myth that winners never quit, even in toxic relationships. The culture itself is the slot machine. So as you step back into your life, ask yourself this: are you letting a society obsessed with the magic trick dictate your reality? Or are you finally ready to look behind the curtain and trust your own perception?